This is the Almost Awakened podcast, a no-nonsense approach to spirituality with your hosts, Brittany Hartley and Bill Reel. Here we dive deep into the wisdom traditions while acknowledging insightful breakthroughs in science, psychology, and human development. Our goal is to explore the good life and the very best of spirituality. No nonsense required. Check us out at almostawakened.org, where you can check out past episodes, make a donation, email us a question or comment, or find out more about the resources we shared. And now, today's podcast episode.
All right. Jana, you are still with us. Super excited. And this is another one of these conversations that you've put together. So I'm super thrilled for this. And how is life treating you?
Life is good. I'm just getting the kids back to school and, getting adjusted to a new way of life again.
My youngest kid started his senior year today. So he went off to start day one of his senior year, and it's the last one. So I've got a suitcase already ready and but we're excited for him to have a good year too. So it's that time of year. And
it is.
By the way, I know that Britt's kids, I think, go back to school this week. And so I think this coming week, we'll just the three of us have a conversation, try to figure out, because we definitely want to accommodate the things that you want to cover. And we'll just find a way to squeeze all this in, but we're really excited.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Cool. I'll let you introduce the topic and our guest today, and we'll go from there.
All right. Well, I'm really excited to introduce my guest today, Father Scott Jenkins. I met Scott about 6 years ago now. Can't believe it. We met at the Living School. Many people who listen may know what that is because I talk about it a lot, but it's a contemplative wisdom school focusing on Christian tradition and Christian mysticism, Christian contemplative streams of thought. And as I got to know Father Scott, I was so drawn to this stream of spirituality that has been a big influence in his life, which is Celtic spirituality. And honestly, Scott is the first person I have ever personally known. I know some names in Celtic spirituality, but I had never met somebody who comes from that stream of thought. And so I wanted to have him on. It makes me think of a little bit, as I thought about framing this conversation, I thought a little bit about about Noah Rasheta and his secular Buddhism, right? And how he starts out his podcast saying, let's explore these things, not to make anyone a Buddhist, but to help you become a better whatever you already are. And my sense in having my conversations that I have had with Scott over the years, I sense there's something really deep and beautiful in Celtic spirituality that we all can take from that. So that's what we're doing here.
Sweet. We'll bring him on. Here's Scott. Let me grab his name up on the screen so folks can see that. All right.
Welcome, Scott.
Hi.
So great to have you with us. Thank you so much for agreeing to come talk to us about this awesome subject.
My pleasure. Good to see you. And, I was going to say good to see you in person again, but it would be good to see you in person.
It would be really good to see you in person. Hopefully we'll be in the same city again soon. So I picked off some things off of your website, off of Celtic Way, to get a little bit about your resume and a little bit about, just in our discussions where you've come from. But you have a really interesting formation and lots of diverse training. I think people may not understand the difference between pastoral training and spiritual direction and chaplaincy and all of those things, but there definitely are distinct, ways of being with people and their spirituality. But I would love if you could just introduce a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your spiritual formation and how you came to Celtic spirituality.
I'm laughing because as you asked me that question, I think it's Paul McCartney's "The Long and Winding Road" begins playing in my mind. It's just like, and it was a different era when this began. The world was such a different place, and I can say, well, began in the late 1960s, and I would think you would know what that meant, but you have no idea because you're younger than I am. So, hippies and protesting the war, and as honest to God, it was like sex, drugs, and rock and roll was pretty much my life and working. And
I was going to say, you named my 3 favorite things.
Well, I grew out of them. I grew out of one of them. Just kind of was, well, I got in my share of trouble. Let's just put it that way. And I had some acquaintances who were concerned about me, and I had a bunch of people living in my house. I paid for this house by illegal gains. I guess I'll just say that. And one by one, the guys living in my house, I think the term was they were getting saved, and it changed them. And until everybody in the house got saved but me. It was my house. I was like, what the hell's going on here? Well, they kept telling me, you need to change your lifestyle. And so I basically told them they need to change location, which they did. And I don't know, one night around 2 or 3 in the morning, I was up in my living room by myself, and they stopped by and they did the whole witness thing. I'm sure it was a traditional witness where the largest guy literally picked me up by my shirt and slammed me against the wall and told me that if I didn't change my life wasn't going to be around much longer. And he threw at me paperback, olive green colored Living New Testament, and it hit me in the chest. And I still have a little dent right here where that hit me. And, and then they left. And frankly, I was so stoned at the time, I started wondering, did this really happen? And I looked on the coffee table and there was the book. And so I stayed up all night and read it. And it was Sunday morning now. And I saw people who would park in front of my house really pissed me off. And they were going to church. So I just went to church. And the church was packed, and I kept looking for a place to sit. There wasn't any. So I sat on the floor, and a bunch of people came up and sat on the floor with me, and I gave my life to Christ, whatever that meant at that moment, at that time. And that was the beginning in a very strong, fundamental, evangelical place. And I needed that, because my life was a little messed up at that time, and having boundaries and having, black and white and everything was really good. And so I stopped a certain enterprise and I worked at a grocery store, and I volunteered for the church. And about 1.5 years later, the associate pastor would meet with me, and he would say, eventually he would say, I think it's time. You probably need to move. There's a certain element in this town that will never let go of you. And it's not headed to a good place. And so we prayed. Jenna, you wouldn't believe this. He wanted me to sell my house and everything and move to San Diego, California. I was like, what the heck? And but
there are worse places to be.
Oh yeah, and so if this was going to happen, you put a fleece out before the Lord. I'm not sure what that is, and everything aligned and went, and I ended up going to college in San Diego. I went to a Christian college. We had 2 private beaches. That's how I knew God wanted me to be there. And the grocery store was right across the street, so I found a way to pay for it legally. And I had a bunch of money with me that I had to give to the bank in steps, and that was the beginning of an academic life. I had a 1.68 grade point average when I was in high school. If that would have been an earned run average as a pitcher, Bill, I would have been in good shape, but it was my grade point average. So I had to really work hard to get in there, learn. And I was very successful as an academic because I was finally motivated, to do this. And I learned that the Bible was not always literally true, which was shocking to me. And it really, went through a lot of turmoil. But I met some good friends. They were Lutherans, which was my childhood background. So I thought, well, I'll try that. I did. And I went up to this town in Northern California called Berkeley. And if you've never been to Berkeley, I just want to tell you that it's very different than San Diego. Let me just say that. And there were 9 graduate schools there called in the Graduate Theological Union. And I was very successful in my academic world there. I reluctantly in the beginning, but I became a Lutheran pastor. And I think I was pretty successful as a Lutheran pastor. But I had my own set of failures, and our daughter had cancer for the first time, and my life spiraled, and I left the Lutheran church and didn't go into a church for a while. And then a friend of mine told me about this ecumenical Catholic community up the highway, and they said, you ought to check it out. Now, excuse me, that's not a vacuum, because when I was at the GTU in Berkeley, it was the Franciscan school that I was drawn to. I did not like the Lutheran school at all. It was very heady and very boring, and but I had to graduate from there. So, but I ran into these ecumenical Catholic people, and I joined them. That's a whole story I won't go into, but it was a really wonderful story. And my wife, Chris, and I joined the church, and we found a really nice home there for a year and a half or 2 years. I don't remember. Yeah. My wife's sitting behind me. She's the keeper of the truth here. And so in the Lutherans, I really got a lot of heady theology. In ecumenical Catholicism, we used to pray the hours every day. We celebrated liturgy. The whole liturgical sacramental thing became really enmeshed in me in a way that it wasn't in the Lutheran church. And being radically inclusive community, it was my first time really just welcoming everyone who came. And that was not only challenging, but it was enlivening for me. And Chris and I moved to Colorado to take a call. We started our own church here. If you want to try something that's difficult, try starting a church whose name is Ecumenical Catholic in a storefront where you have no denominational financing, no support whatsoever, and say, we're going to make a go of this, which we did for 20 years.
Wow.
And we also helped start a couple other churches, and all these churches are still going today, which is wonderful. So there is a wonderful part of Catholicism, right? It's not just the legal authoritarian. I mean, it can be, think about Francis and Clare. And think about St. Vincent de Paul. And so we were very much a church that celebrated Eucharist. We celebrated being together and socially, and we worked really hard about serving people in need. Those were very important pieces for us. And somewhere during that time, maybe I was like 12 or 15 years into Holy Family, my wife, Chris, had been working at the Episcopal Cathedral in Denver, St. John's Cathedral, and they had a speaker that night, and we decided that we should go. Well, I had a really shitty day that day, and when I came home, I was in a foul mood, and honestly, some of the people we were going with to that thing, you know how it is when you're a pastor, you serve everybody, you don't like everybody, that's it. And some of these people I didn't like, and the weather it was colder than hell outside, and it was snowing. And I came home and I said, honey, I think I'm just going to call these people and tell them I don't want to go. I'm tired. Yeah. And she very nicely, very firmly, if you know Chris, she said to me, well, you just got to, right now, you're going to change 2 things. One is your clothes, and the other is your attitude. And then they'll be here to pick us up, and we are going. Okay. So we went to the cathedral, and we got there maybe 5 minutes before this started, which I hate that. My dad was a Marine Corps sergeant. If you weren't early, you were late and in trouble. And we ended up having to sit in the front row. And this guy came out to speak. His name was John Philip Newell. I don't know if you've read any of his books. Bill, have you? Or no? Jenna, have you read any? No?
I have not read it, but know the name.
Okay. And so I'm sitting there listening, and he's talking, and I can't keep up with the right. I finally stopped writing, started just listening, because at the break, there were a bunch of his books back on a table, and that's what I always do. I buy books and I digest them, So I did, and for that year and a half after meeting him, it was a struggle. It turned everything that I knew, was familiar with, that I believed. It either called them seriously into question, or something inside of me went, that's right. I mean, that inside. What he's saying is right. Now I just got to find some place that proves it. That's how I was still in my head and all that. And about, I don't know, we decided that we were going to do a Celtic liturgy on Saturday nights once a month. So I went to the board. They said, yeah. And I was ready. I went online to find this ritual, and it wasn't there. And I thought, oh, crap. There's no liturgy. So I ended up writing my own every month, So that helps you grow. Really got into it, and it was challenging and so life-giving. And then, you know what, Jenna, for the first time in my life, I could take something that resonated inside of myself and say, yeah, no, that's right. That's how I really feel. I can remember being a Lutheran pastor, standing at the door when people were leaving, and somebody would stop and say, oh, I'm not going to be in church next week. I'm going to the mountains, and that's where I feel really close to God. And I thought, man, what a bunch of crap that is, But yeah, no, that was right. I mean, I knew that as a kid. But when you study theology, the theology is what's right, and your experience is not right. And so we've just been into that. And John Philip Newell, one time I was volunteering for his stuff. He came up to me and he said, I'm going to speak, and you can launch Celtic Way, and I'll be the speaker, and we'll attract people, and whatever money you get, you can use that as seed money. And so that's how our organization began. And so that night, because I had already been chaplaining part-time down at Mile High Ministries, it's a transitional housing place, as well as the Justice and Mercy Legal Aid Center that deals with pretty poor people who need help with immigration and other things. So I decided that part of the crowd I was going to invite would be poor people who were on the streets, and which they came, and all my friends from Denver and Aurora came. It was a nice, wonderful evening, and it got us going. So that's that doesn't do justice to all the internal things that happened.
Yeah.
But it did instill something into me that I was invited to attend a workshop at the Claremont School of Theology when I was in college. And John Cobb was the presenter, and he talked about process theology, and it blew my mind. I mean, I was just like, wow. But what stuck with me was the very deep belief that God is evolving, God is growing, God changes, and God is very dynamic. That never left me. I couldn't prove that or anything, It wasn't in the creed. But it really worked for me. And when I was preparing for this podcast, I looked back on my life as from evangelical to Lutheran to Catholic to Celtic, which I have some friends who've been with me through that whole thing, right? They shake their head. They're like, well, I'm not quite sure what's going on with you, but I like you. Oh, it's okay. But I look back and I say, well, of course, that's how it is. That's how God is.
Yeah.
I've got a little question here, just because when I first saw the name, I pronounced it Celtic. The only thing I know is the Boston Celtics.
Yeah,
right? So
no.
I'm not familiar with Celtic.
Yeah.
Are we talking the same word? And
We
are
are.
they pronounced? Because I know you guys are pronouncing it right, but are they pronouncing it wrong? Should it be the Boston Celtics?
You know, no. it all depends who you talk to, Bill. Really.
Gotcha.
You talk to people on the East Coast, and they're like, "What's the matter with you? It's not a K, it's a C."
Yeah.
Now, well, C is for cat. You know.
Right.
and living so long in California, it's pronounced Lakers, Bill, not Celtics.
You got it. Nailed it.
Yeah, so it's been quite a ride, and it's been authentically mine.
Yeah.
And I can own that.
Well, I love that. A couple of things that I'm hearing in that formation is, there's this identity formation that's going on throughout your life. And what I'm hearing is that I'm hearing the growth in that. You're saying God grows and changes. I hear the growth in you, right? The evangelical to Lutheran and to ecumenical, each step of the way, it's feeling bigger and bigger and bigger. It's including more and more and more, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, there are a couple things I'm curious. There are many things I could talk to you for days about this, but I'm really curious about those transition points. And I'm really curious about how easy or difficult those were for you. And I'm really curious about what you found moved you forward.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Leaving the evangelical thing. Well, I'm not sure that I've ever left completely any of these. So in the evangelical stream, I was gifted with a real love and dedication to the scriptures. Now, they might have almost been the fourth person of the Trinity early on, or fourth person of the quadrinity, whatever it is. But that has stayed with me ever since. So I'm very grateful for that. When I went to college, and even more so in graduate school, and you learn all the critical methods and all the historical stuff, the fundamentalism goes away. That's hard. Because when things are in black and white and are authoritarian, then that's what you do, right? Yeah. And when somebody says there's another way to read this, or taking the Bible seriously, was a book that I read probably in one day when I was in college, and I was not a fast reader. I couldn't put it down because it was so, it seemed so right, but it was not a fundamentalist approach to the Bible. We're taking history and culture and language very seriously made sense to me finally, and so I kept that. And learning in the Lutheran Church about the history of the church, Protestants, I don't know about most in the evangelical church, there were Jesus and the apostles, and then Billy Graham. I didn't know what happened in between. And in the Lutheran church, there was Jesus and the apostles and Martin Luther. It was like, oh, yeah. And the Reformation, and then on we went, and they were wrong and we were right, and that's a drag, I can't even tell you what that's like, but
yeah.
I think, if we really want to have transformation, we have to be transformed first as individuals. And if we're going to be transformed, I think it's true that we have to allow for like the incompleteness of our truth and the complexity of what it means to be a human being. And it's so that encapsulates what St. Paul said, I see through a glass dimly, okay? I don't see it clearly. And that's freeing. When I went to the GTU and I could take classes in the Episcopal, Dominican, Franciscan, all these different, you get all these different insights, and you begin to realize I'm a little bit myopic here in my tradition. That's not good.
Yeah, Scott, if I can just say that was my experience of the Living School. right? Like I come from Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm raised in the Mormon church. I start having my own kind of questions and pulls beyond the black and white. But yet, as I'm wrestling with that, I feel like I like to just, I don't know. It's like I'm in this Mormon bubble fighting it out. It's true. It's not true. It's true. It's not true. It's, and going to the living school kind of blew all that open for me. And it's exactly what you're describing. I noticed for the first time in my life how small this stream is in the stream of humanity.
Yeah.
And that so many of us are doing this same thing in all of our different traditions.
Yes.
Right?
No, I think there's a lot of that going on now.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, Jana, and I'll say this to you too, Bill, when I first met Jana at the living school, and I don't know if you introduced yourself as a Latter-day Saint or a Mormon. I'm not sure.
A Mormon. At the time, it was still kosher to call myself a Mormon. And I did.
And I thought to myself, and I love you, Jana, you know that, but I thought, what the hell is she doing here? Why are you here? And I thought, well, she's not going to be here very long, because this is going to blow her mind. But then I got to know Jana, and I thought, no, I think Jana's going to blow my mind. And it's like, I didn't know Mormons were like this, but there you are. So.
I keep trying to tell Scott I'm not your average Mormon, but,
no,
don't take me as representative of the movement.
Yeah. Don't go walking into a group of Mormons and hoping that you're going to get them all to be that way. It's not going to happen.
No, I don't think it's going to happen that way at all. No.
It would have to be a special collection, I think.
Yeah.
The fringies. But so tell me, I'm just curious, just for my own curiosity, when you say it's an ecumenical Catholic church, how is it sounds like there's no formal connection to Catholicism. You're not getting the funding. You're not like part of that stream. No. How does that work? And what part of this is Catholicism if it's ecumenical? Yeah. And why are the Catholics okay with you using that name if you're not part of them? I don't know. I have so many questions about this.
You do. Yeah. No, they don't recognize us.
Okay.
They don't appreciate us. They don't like us. When I first moved to Aurora, and here we had this little bitty church. Honest to God, maybe at the time we had like 12 or 20 people. And I get this call from the Roman Catholic Diocese. And they're like, we want you to come to the diocesan office. And, we need to talk to you. And I'm like, I don't have that need. So, no, I'm not going to do that. And they were offended. What do you mean? I'm not part of you. You're not part of me. We don't like each other. So what part don't you understand? So we met at a coffee shop. These two priests all dressed up, we're official. We're the real Roman Catholics. Good for you. I kept thinking if you were the real Roman Catholics, you wouldn't be such assholes and so narrow-minded and exclusionary when it comes to the Lord's Supper. But, and they said, well, the one thing we want is that you would never come across to people and deceive them. I said, I don't understand what you're talking about. And they said, we don't want you coming across as your Roman Catholic. I laughed out loud. I was like, hell no, I don't want anybody thinking that's who I am. Are you kidding me? So yeah, we didn't have a problem after that because I wasn't about to do that. But then, they would go and talk about us. They'd say, your sacraments aren't real and you're not real. And I said, well, the babies we baptized were real babies. And the people who died, we did real funerals and we do real weddings for people and crisis counseling. And when we feed the hungry, those are very real, hungry, needy people. So
it just strikes me the parallels to my own experience, right?
Yeah.
This human need to have it be the way, the authority, the thing in our different groupings, and how deeply that is truly felt by people who are in that stream.
Oh, yeah, no,
there's this real human need, and when you step outside, it's always so, I don't know, baffling at that point to look back and say, how can we be so small? It was at the living school that I learned that Catholic even actually means universal.
Yeah.
Oh, the irony.
Oh,
right?
And that's why I kept thinking, to be Catholic, you have to be ecumenical. You cannot be this narrow grouping.
Right.
We, unlike the Mormon church, we don't claim to have like books that fell down from the sky and these glasses and stuff. But the Roman church has a magisterium, and they'll tell you how to interpret.
Right.
Only they can. And that's when I'm like, okay, no. So, when we would do Bible studies at Holy Family, people were just almost in shock. It'd be like, what are you asking my opinion about? What does this mean? Yeah. How does it engage you? How does it impact you? Well, usually the Father tells us. Oh, well, yeah, here we go.
Which is just offloading, right? We're offloading our spirituality, our authority to somebody else. And what happens in us over time, right?
Oh.
When we're doing that, when we aren't asked the question and when we're not asking ourselves and when we can't disagree.
Right. When you're in a deconstruction mode, so, as a Lutheran or whatever, I had constructed this theology and I knew it really well. When I came into the Catholic thing, I got to hear the other side of the story, right? But still could frame things, right? When you move from whatever your constructed place is to this no person's land, in the war we used to call it no man's land, right? That's a hard time because the anxieties and the pitfalls of life and the hard things. I mean, I understand completely today when you look at the world and everything that's taking place, why people go to a place that says we have the answers. We have a place of security. You are safe in the hands of God here. And I get it. Totally, I get it. I left a drug culture to go into a black and white evangelical fundamentalist world because it provided some guidance and structure for me.
Absolutely, which is so helpful at a certain part of our lives. We all need that. We all need to feel that safety and being held by that, right?
Yep.
Mormonism seemed like the perfect thing when I was 17 years old.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah, Bill is a convert. So
From
where
what?
I was born and raised.
From a blue-collar family that had no religiosity at all.
There you go. I get that. Yeah.
So tell me, Scott, I'm really curious, as you went to hear John Philip Newell speak, and this overturned your life, I'm really curious about what was it? And so everyone knows John Philip Newell was speaking from this space of Celtic spirituality, correct?
Yeah, he's quite an authority.
Yeah. Okay. So what was it that caught you, that invited you into something deeper, that your soul was just saying, oh yeah.
Right. Well, let's see. He talked about his own lived experience as a young person and how he felt and how what witnessed to him when he would be in nature. Now I had to, because I grew up in Iowa, and as he was talking, I was thinking about the times that, we'd be out in the country, or I'd be walking through a cornfield, or we'd be at a lake. And I thought, because my family of origin, our home, was anything but safe. It was not peaceful. But when I was out there, I felt at peace. I felt secure. Or when I went to my grandmother's house, and she would read the Bible to me and she would pray. But John was convinced in a very genuine way that there are two books of Revelation given to us on the Christian journey. Not saying that everybody has a right to this, right? Because the very first, well, we call it a book, the first revelatory place is creation, right? I mean, even in Romans chapter 1, verse 20 talks about we don't have an excuse. It's right here in front of us. And what does it show? It shows diversity. It shows provision, right? It shows evolution. It shows the change of seasons and the progress and the provision. And if we're wise enough, we can look at the change of seasons almost as a mirror reflecting of our lives. Yeah. We have a springtime, summer. We have an autumn. And if you're fortunate to live as long as me, you'll have a winter, and you'll appreciate the depths of that as well. And so nature was, that was a thing. Well, here I am sitting there, and I'm thinking about my Augustinian influence. Oh, no. Nature can only tell you so much. No, don't be deceived, But inside of me, I'm like, damn, it's really good to see this person say this out loud and like testify to is amazing. And then the next person that he talked about, of course, I learned as the church's first great heretic, and that was Pelagius. And Pelagius confronted Augustine, Augustine, I think, is one of the most brilliant people in the history of Christianity. But when it comes to anthropology and his take on original sin, that's just, I think he's dealing with his own past as a young man, his drinking, his sexual exploits, what he would call the desires of the flesh, how it consumed him. Listen, I was a young man, I get it. And, but Pelagius said, I don't think that's how sin is. I really don't. He kind of said, he said that sin's like righteousness, It's like, well, if you have a family, so you have a dad and a couple of kids and a wife, and the dad has some bad behaviors. It's witnessing those behaviors that becomes, now I'm the kid. I see that, I pick that up. And, it spreads that way into the village. And the village spreads into the region, and the region spreads into you understand, it's transmitted by behavior, by choice. And so is righteousness. A temptation comes along, and the dad says, son, daughter, don't do this. And here's why, And so righteousness can be transmitted the same way. Well, Augustine's like, oh, no, that's wrong. That's wrong. And eventually, Augustine tried so many times, he finally, with all his political clout in the West, he was named a heretic. In the Eastern Church, they're like, no, we don't see any heresy here. And Augustine, we really love you, but you're weird when it comes to this whole thing. That's no. So I'm listening to this, and I'm like, man, I mean, the confession is, we have sinned against you by thought, word, and deed, what we have done and by what we have left undone. See what kind of mark that leaves? I still remember that, And Pelagius, to me, it seemed to put the responsibility of my righteousness and my sinfulness on me. And the other thing is, and we're all adults, and I can say this to you, that original sin would be transmitted through the act of making love. Seemed really, really, I mean, what kind of a God does this? That doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah.
So I'm like nature as a revelation equal with the Bible. There's no original sin. Oh my gosh, what's next? Well, what's next?
Yeah, I feel like, I've as I've thought about Augustine, as I've learned more about Augustine, I've cursed his name many, many, many times, that he had such a lasting, effect on Christian thought that lasts until this day. And my guess is that there would always be an Augustine if it weren't Augustine, right? But I think it shows you what happens when I think there's a fair amount of guilt and self-loathing. How that when that gets framed into religion, And I think it always does. There's always going to be someone in the line learning your tradition, learning whatever, that is going to have enough that is self-loathing that then, you know, and it has that black and white thinking to the point that it just makes everything so narrow. And then that transmits, just the way you say righteousness can transmit, the guilt transmits, the shame transmits,
it does.
right?
Yep.
And the very thing that we're looking to for healing, for community, for wellness, this little piece starts to transmit that then turns people off of religion altogether. Like, if this is what this is doing to me, why would I be part of this?
Right.
And when I'm a person leaving and I'm having all of those feelings, I look at the other people and think, well, it must be doing that to them too. Well, maybe to some degree or not. Who knows? That it maybe that's just the way it works for you and you are perfectly well. And that's hard. It is hard to look across any kind of these divides and to imagine that someone else is well doing it a way that we're not doing it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, so I'm hearing in there's this deep tie to nature, and I just feel that. I mean, I think, I don't know how many times I've thought over the course of my life that I'll see something on some nature show, or I'll experience something, or I'll notice something about nature and just think, that is just like my life. And sometimes I forget that I'm, you know, I believe in evolution. We're part of this world that evolved by whatever means. And I've grown up completely separated from this thing that is nature. And yet I'm so deeply part of it. That just seems to speak to me.
Well, good. I mean, that's so good. But no, really. And it's timely because I'm going to tell you, I keep thinking about this. I hope I don't offend anybody. When the Me Too movement came along, I mean, all of us, men, women, everybody's like, oh my God, we need this. Somebody needs to talk about this. And that's true. And I'm for it, and all of it's right. But there was a woman who got left out of this movement. Mother Nature. You see, we use her, right? We see her as she's here for my wants and my needs. And I really don't care about her than anything but that. And unless we can get back to a place where we truly see and believe that the presence of God is within the natural world, okay? I'm not saying it's the same as being within people. Maybe it is, you know, but somehow the presence, the creative power of God that brought forth nature is still there, sustaining, keeping it alive, keeping the universe, everything's going, right? And unless we can see the sacredness of our environment, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure we're going to, as long as we can objectify her, and there's a word I'm not using, which is, you know, we just can't keep on. This path is, we've got to be in this together. Somebody said to me when I did a presentation at a church, oh, but we were given, what was the word in the King James? We were giving dominion over nature. Well, you were, you know, you dummy. But did you ever stop to think of the dominion, being the king or the queen, meant to be a benevolent king, one that looked out for your subjects, that took, you might actually care for your subjects more than you do for yourself.
That's hard. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
It's just that there's this recognition that human beings somehow got off the food chain. Right? Like we stepped away from the normal process that all the other animals participate in.
Right.
We eat anything that's edible. We live in every geographic location. And so as you're pointing out, maybe having dominion meant you're the one species that could F it all up. And hence you ought to be as responsible and as caring about this planet as possible. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it does to me
100%.
too. Yeah.
100%. We separated ourselves from this. I listened to a podcast not long ago that talked about this being the original human wound, is that we separated ourselves from nature.
Yeah. I really believe that's true. I think that the Celtic spirituality is calling us all back to this, to say maybe the way forward is the way back. I think we're the only species on this planet that's figured out we can just overpopulate this planet and it'll be fine. And it's not.
Yep.
You know? Yeah.
Absolutely. So, okay, so there's this nature aspect, which makes me think I have very limited understanding of Celtic spirituality, I'll be honest. But something that comes up for me is I always tie it. So first of all, British Isles. I have some idea that they grew up in the British Isles. I have some connection in my brain to pagan something or other, you know, and I don't even know the words for it. But when I think of Celtic spirituality, I think of people, you know, living with nature and having more of these grounded religious spirit, you know, holidays and things that were marking periods of time that then Christianity also kind of came in and co-opted in some ways, like, you know, Easter maybe had something to do with spring and rites, and then we made it about Jesus's whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, but so I think of the Celtic spirituality having these deep roots in this, and so I'm really curious how paganism meets Christianity, and how the Celtic spirituality holds on to this kind of sensibility of all of this without this organization. Like, I'm so confused about what this is.
Oh, good. So now you're on step one. Step one is confusion. So, all right. I think, you know, I referred to my own family of origin. My woundedness, I carried with me through all these transitions. And I think different parts of my woundedness have been met by each step along the way. And so it's important to understand that the Celtic Christian movement is pretty old. It's in your Bible. When you read Paul's letter to the Galatians, somewhere in the 50s, all right? Galatia was a region that about 150 years before Paul got there, and which is in Turkey, by the way. And those people that lived there were Celts. The Romans could not vanquish them. And so, like any good Roman movement, whether it's church or government, they bought them a bunch of land and said, stop fighting with us. This land is yours. All you have to do is stop fighting us. Okay. This is the region that Paul went to. And founded a church and wrote this letter. And it's very interesting when you listen to what he says. In Christ, there's neither free nor slave. There's neither Jew nor Gentile. There's neither male nor female. All these aspects are reflected in Celtic culture. Because in Celtic culture, women were not second-rate anything. They were warriors. They were hunters. Some of them were chiefs of tribes. And so if you want to look at the first scriptural reference to Celtic tradition, it comes from about 20 years after Jesus died, you know. And we're not sure where the Celtic people came from. Their empire is could be, if they would have been a centralized government, they would have been one of the largest empires in the world. But they weren't. They were tribal confederations. And so when they spread, they eventually spread up to what today is the UK. They, went across the Rhine all the way to Western Europe, down into parts of Spain and Portugal. They spread to the east, down in Turkey, northern Italy, up into Germania. They were all over the place. And so when you think about the history of Christianity as still a unrecognized religion until 300 something AD, right? So somewhere in the first century, when The Roman soldiers were in Britannia. A lot of their slaves and the people they brought with them were Christians. Maybe that's how Christianity got there. In the 300s and leading up to that, I would say even in the 200s, when Christianity was becoming close to being recognized, and most of the Christianities in the cities, and the cities were becoming very immoral, right? A lot of people fled to the deserts of Palestine, Syria, Egypt. They lived in caves or strict monastic communities. And I don't know what ignited some of those people, but they took a long trek to the coast, caught a ship, and settled in Great Britain. And they formed monastic communities, not churches. They worshiped in the groves, right? Because the trees would grow up and over and provide a canopy. They were very much into silence and contemplation.
Okay.
They read the scriptures together and sought, an interpretation out of that. They very much taught people who were neighboring Celtic pagans how to sew and how to do all these things. And the pagans would hear them singing in the chapel. And they'd say, "What are you singing?" And they would maybe have a manuscript or something of the Psalms. And you see, Celtic pagan people were not allowed to write. They couldn't read. Only the Druids could read. Well, when the pagans began to visit, like the chapel services and so on, and somebody would bring out the book and read the stories. Celtic people love stories about heroes and heroines and battles and all, and here were all these stories. And what they found out is that these pagans were going off to a remote place, and because they had been taught how to write, they would begin to write stories and poems and songs and come back to the monastery and share them with people. And so what I want to say to you, because you and I come from religions that we either have it right and you're wrong, but that's not how the monastic movement started. It was like a marriage between Celtic pagans and these Christians now who were living in Britannia, right? And so in some of the monasteries they would have an abbess, a woman, as the leader. And they would have men and women living in the same monastery. What the hell? You know what? That could happen. Oh, look out. And, it was incredible. And so we had the combining of cultures, the combining of spiritualities. And I know I don't have time to go through this with you, but if we could look at the development of the Christian liturgical year, the calendar, that's a circle, right? And so then what you can plainly see is that the Christian calendar is overlaid on the Celtic calendar. Both of the year begins at the darkest time. Because Jews and Celts, right? The day began at sundown, not sunup. Right. So the year begins at night. And springtime is when everything is coming back to life. There's only one place, if you're a Christian, you can put Easter on that calendar. And that's in the springtime, right?
Yep.
And then, of course, the great Pentecost, right? Fire, falling, transforming, boom. Yeah, and that has to happen at the Celtic feast of Beltane, May 1st, or Maypole. There we are. And so they begin to intermingle. And then Lammas, that happens in August 1st, the first harvest. And you look at all the Christian feasts that go on in the fall. Oh, yeah, well, I wonder why. And then, and this is most interesting to me, All Saints originally was in August. But you see, to compete with the Celts, October 31st was Samhain, the beginning of the year. And so the church very cleverly moved All Saints to November 1st. Because on October 31st, Celtic people were leaving out little snacks and little trinkets because that was the time of year when the veil between the living and the dead was very thin. And if you didn't want these ghosts and stuff coming into your house, you had to leave something on the porch, right, for them to take. And so the church is like, well, we're going to celebrate All Saints on this time of year too, and All Souls. It's like, oh, so there's a whole give and take here. And yeah.
There's just so much history. Like as you're talking, there's just so much history. It just strikes me how clueless I am about all of the traditions that were handed to me, all of the holidays that were handed to me, everything that I see in the world. Like we wake up as human beings. We're born, we grow up, and it's just the water we are swimming in, and we don't even know that decisions that were made and people that came together all this time ago combined to affect my life in a way of what I do with my children on October 31st. It's really wild to me. So tell me this, because it's obvious where this pagan sensibility and this Celtic sensibility comes together, and then we see how that has played out in our Western Christian world, and then also how that is leaked into just all of our world, right? But how does Celtic spirituality survive without it being a church like the Catholic Church? Like how does that sensibility survive? How does it come to John Philip Newell? So I heard you talk about poems and things that are written. Is that how this is transmitted? How does this work?
Well, it works because it's meeting some of the most basic human needs that we have. If you're around pagan people, whether they're Celtic or otherwise, one of the things I appreciate about them is they have a deep respect. Remember Richard Rohr's definition of respect. You look twice, you see deeply, right? And so they have a deep respect for nature. They have a deep respect for everybody. They don't get lost in transgender, bi, gay, straight, that people are people. And that came into Celtic Christianity. Hospitality was a hallmark for Celtic Christians. And during the wintertime when people were traveling through and had to find food and warmth, Celtic Christians were known. People would go out of their way to be in their presence in the wintertime because they need be safe and secure. So how is it going? There is a community that I visited 3 times in the last 12 years in Northern England called the Northumbria community. And I would, encourage you to look at their website. There are places like that. There's the community of Aidan and Hilda on, on this little island, the holy island of Lindisfarne off the coast of England. There are little groups like our little Celtic Way group here in Colorado. We have a new teacher who lives in Ohio. Our classes on Zoom are 3.5 years old, and they go from one coast to the next. People are interested and they stay, and this is like become real community for them. We meet in a place once a month for Eucharist and prayer. Another time in the month we meet for evening prayer and Lectio. Janet, the word just kind of gets out, and there's so many books published on this now that churches are looking for anything good to help them survive. And so I don't know how many Methodist churches I've been invited to speak at. I just got invited again to go back to this Methodist church because they recognize the value of ecology, of radical inclusion. And so it's just kind of this underground water that is getting into the soil of all these different kinds. Lutheran churches today are embracing Celtic Christianity, which just blows my mind, But desperate times call for desperate measures,
Yeah, because we are in this time, right, of exodus, great exodus from organized religion. People are not finding what they're needing there anymore. I mean, you and I had a conversation about young people, and you told me the things that the young people show up for. And what did you tell me? I thought it was so fascinating.
Oh, I don't know if I can remember, but I can tell you the quote I just heard again is that the church has a really good way of keeping the truth outside and dealing with things that really aren't. But you tell me, what did I tell you? What
you told me? They show up for the nature walks.
Yeah, they do.
They show up for social justice movements.
They do.
Show up to serve one another.
Yep.
They show up, and you are the one. Celtic Way, I'm assuming, is the one that says, "Hey, we're going to organize this. We're going to go for a nature walk. Show up a Tuesday at 4, and we're going to do this." Right.
So the Heartlight Center, where we meet at, and they do the best ministry I've ever been around for people who are grieving. It's their world. And so one of the directors said to me, I think we need to do a nature walk for people who are grieving, and Celtic Way and Heartlight Center can do this together. And I said, yeah, we're gonna. So we're already planning. You know, along the way, because the Celtic message about the Anam Cara, the soul friend, has been reflected in this whole development of Celtic Way. I could not have gone through this transitions, none of them, without my wife. You know, and I was just telling her today, our youngest granddaughter just is off to college to Colorado Springs. And it's a wonderful thing. And it's so heartbreaking to see her go, you know. And it took me back to when I went from Iowa to California. We just lost Bill.
We lost Bill. He'll be back, hopefully.
Okay. And what a rock she has been for me, a stabilizing influence. And then I had somebody who was chairperson at our church council. Terry Thompson was one of the people who came to me and said, we should start this Celtic thing. It's in your blood. And she could see the people. And Chris was always there encouraging me. You know, you start with nothing and you move forward.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Okay, so I have two questions that I just want to explore. Two little things that so we've got nature. I've heard different things from you in describing this Celtic spirituality, but you know, if we can just kind of name some of the sensibilities that you have learned from this thought, you know, and I don't even know what to call Celtic Christianity, right? Like it sounds like it's actually a group in Britain. And they have these communities.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah. And they're just kind of all over.
Yeah, they really are.
It's kind of word of mouth, and someone experiences it and says, hey, I want to start kind of this group where I am and explore.
Let's get a book and start reading it together.
Okay.
And let's pray together.
Okay. So, and there's not like, okay, we're going to have some hierarchical structure of who is leading us, or it sounds kind of just organic.
Know, when you go online, you can see the Celtic Church in America. They have bishops, deacons, priests.
Okay.
And to be fair, it didn't take Celtic Christianity very long. I mean, they had them too. Not right away.
Okay.
But, you know, Christianity only had one model. You know, I don't know if you've ever looked at, but the Roman Catholic Church hierarchy is the same as the mafia. They have the same hierarchy. It's very efficient, right?
Yes. Yeah.
At Celtic Way, we talk about a circle of equals when we're together in class, when we're coming together to pray. People recognize if you're educated, informed in a certain level, you know. So I do share the speaking role when we have our breaking bread, but most of the time it's me because people know me and trust me. But we have some people who are coming up who've gone to school because that's what you do. You hand the baton on, you don't keep it for yourself. So the circle of equals thing is very important to me. Every single person has access to the divine. Every single person can hear the word of the Lord. Every single person can respond in faith. That's so important. So yeah, we have an organization We have a podcast. We just celebrated our 10,000th download. We have quite an email distribution. And people are doing stuff with it out there. And that's fine. Nobody says, can we do this? Hell no. I can give you a list of books that I trust, these authors, that recommend one to you for a good starting place. It's called Celtic Christianity.
Okay.
Deep Roots for a Modern Faith.
Okay. We can put that in our show notes.
And it's by Ray Simpson.
Okay. All right. So
Ray has started a community over there called the Community of Aiden and Hilda, and he's been doing it for quite a long time.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we have these groups that do have some sort of formation and some hierarchies and deacons and whatever. So
some do. Yeah.
Some do. Okay. That is not a necessity to be working in this kind of Celtic spirituality.
No,
it sounds like it's very accessible. Anyone can pick it up. No one's going to come after you.
No,
they're not going to call you in like the Roman Catholics.
They wouldn't
say,
come
what
after
are you
you
doing?
because they'd be so confused about who you are. We are followers of Jesus who are very much influenced by nature and equality.
So I've heard this. I've heard equality in this. I've heard ecumenism. What's the word? Ecumenism.
Ecumenism. Yeah.
Yeah. In that, I've heard that women were, there was equality among the genders in the roots of this. Is that still something that is held as
very important?
I can see how this is turning your world upside down.
It's a good turn.
Yeah, and very rooted in nature and very rooted in our place in it.
Very much.
Is there anything else I've missed as main?
Well, I'm looking at the time, so I'm hesitant to bring this whole thing up. But how we deal with Jesus, is very important. And atonement theories, the old ones, not quite sure they work for us.
Okay.
For some Celtic groups, very much so. But I think for Celtic Way, do we believe that Jesus is the divine Son who came to teach us how to love and live? Yeah. And why was he killed? Well, because he came to teach us how to love and live, and it didn't fit in with Rome or a small number of very powerful Jewish leaders of the day, And Celtic Christianity has always embraced a very loving and accepting God, always, And I won't get into this whole thing about universalism and stuff, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about who's in and out of heaven. That's not our deal. Our deal and how it was for Celtic Christianity from the very beginning was to be formed into the image of God's Son. That's the deal. So, the spiritual battle is mostly with ourselves.
Okay. So if you're a person who, let's say that you've been really turned off by literal stories of all of this and literal stories of Jesus and this is who it is, this is how you have to do this. Would that person feel comfortable in visiting a community of Celtic Christians? Do we have to believe in Jesus? Do we have to believe in certain things?
Well, do you have to believe in Jesus? Would you come to a Celtic Christian place if you didn't believe in Jesus? I don't know. Yeah. We believe in Jesus, and that's our choice, and that's our heritage, it's our calling. That's who we believe is the one we follow, right? We don't beat people up if they don't. In fact, we have a guy who comes every single month. He never takes communion, and he doesn't believe in God. But his wife does, so he brings her, and he and I are tight, and what Jesus once said, so if the only people you love are the people who love you, what good is that? I think, we've got to love everybody,
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, Jan, I think really God does really love and favor everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're a Buddhist or if you're, Jewish or Mormon, I don't worry about where your eternal soul's going.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we're all going to end up in the same place and go, oh, geez, what the hell was I thinking?
Yeah.
Janen's a Mormon. I'll probably never get to know her, But, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Bill.
Well, yeah, at the very beginning of the conversation, you said something about having to deconstruct at least some of the literalness of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I play in this sandbox with tons of people who have deconstructed. And it seems as though on the front end of that, people only deconstruct as much as either science or rational thinking imposes on them that they deconstruct, and they don't want to go any further than they have to. And I'm just curious what deconstruction in terms of literal belief versus like what you kept and what you didn't. Not that we have time for a long list of what you kept or didn't, but rather how did you in your mind formulate decisions about what to keep and what not to?
Yeah. So what we need is an hour meeting after dinner, a glass of Jameson, and a pint of Guinness.
I like that.
Yeah, we could do that. And because when Celtic Way service is over, we drink and eat together for a couple hours probably, because that's important. The first thing I would say is that it's easy when it comes to the scripture to see that there are different forms of literature in itself in the Bible. There are songs called the Psalms, or there's the Song of Solomon. And if you're not into metaphor, I would think the Song of Solomon's rather dreary, But if you're into metaphor, then you get in bed with your wife and read it, right? And then there's didactic material. There are miracle stories. There are conflict stories between Jesus and whoever. There are parables. So the different types of literature are there. And the first thing is to raise the question, we really can't say to each other that we have to interpret all these different types of literatures exactly through the same hermeneutical lens, right? That doesn't make sense. I do not read math the same way I read Emerson, right? And I'm not going to read physics the same way I'm going to read Elizabeth Brown. You just have to do that. And I think one of the things that the Celtic people really benefited from is this whole idea of anam cara, the soul friend. To do this journey alone is hazardous. St. Bridget would say, a person without a soul friend is like a body without a head. It's because it's easier for us to deceive and to lie to ourselves than it is anybody else, And when you read the scripture together with another person, I've had the same soul friend for 27 years. And that has not always been easy. I have a wife who speaks truth to me, who puts up with my anxieties and all my brokenness, and who has made me a better person. We really need each other. And when we sit down to read a book that is minimally 2,300 years old, minimally, if not 5,000, 6,000 years old, and we stop for a moment and think, like every other damn thing in our society, that it should be convenient and instantaneous. Oh, I read this, I should understand it, all of it, the background, the etymology, the cultural context. Oh no, then this is a bad rant for me, Bill. But people who are in the middle of their deconstruction and walk away from their faith, this is not going to get a lot of popularity. I think a lot of them are just lazy. People do not put time and energy into researching their own religious tradition. No. And a lot of my friends, they've deconstructed and they're cool about that. And we don't have anything to do with the Bible anymore because it's old and it doesn't make any sense. And I just, y'all are lazy.
So it's so interesting, Scott, that you say that, because I believe that that is true for that tradition. And this is actually, you've stumbled on as probably a sore point for a lot of people who leave Mormonism specifically, because we are accused of being lazy. But it's coming from a different place than you are, because we actually I mean, I found Bill as a podcaster because I needed to know more about it. And it actually, I became the people I work with who are leaving Mormonism are the most informed, least lazy learners that I have ever met, because they are just trying to grasp, because it's been so insular, because it's been so, this is all right or all wrong. The whole epistemology of your entire life starts to fall apart.
It does.
So, yes. And so people just go really deep into learning all of it, right? And I will also say this, I think it's also trauma. Like, people have been traumatized.
Part of it, yes. And Catholic, and Mormon, Baptist, doesn't matter.
And I even mean it in like series of little T traumas of not being able to be yourself.
Yeah.
And told you're wrong and being cut off from your soul, right?
Yeah.
So I think that the people I work with, I don't see a lot of laziness in our tradition. I see a lot of trauma, and I see a lot of people who don't want to be duped again.
Yeah, I don't mean that everybody who's deconstructing is lazy.
Yeah.
But I get a little tired when people say, oh, the Bible just doesn't make any sense.
Sure.
Well, how much time have you put into it? They don't even want to hear that question.
Sure.
You know, yeah. And here's the other thing. Science. I love science. I subscribe to NASA, and I love to see all this stuff. It just blows my mind. But science, talk about evolution. Thank God, you know, that science is evolving and growing and changing.
Yep.
You know, there was a time that science said the earth was flat, right? Or there was a time when science said that the earth was the center of the universe, you know. So can we just be a little humble about our scientific propositions that we know are eternal truths?
Right.
Okay. You know,
because we can't, the attitude toward that, what I'm hearing, can be similar to what people do in church. This is my safe place. This is, someone is telling me the way things are. Yeah. And I think none of us want to face that possibility that we are just vulnerable, that we are living in a world that is difficult.
Yeah.
And whether you can approach either one with the same kind of attitude of, well, now I've found my place and I don't have to worry or question.
I do hear that.
Right? 100%. So one of the things I'm hearing you say, though, that I think is really important, Scott, is that we can't use the same tools that we use for everything. To your point, I'm not going to read my scientific, journals the same way I'm going to read a David White poem.
Right.
Right. And I think that's something we miss a little bit in religion, especially when we are raised to believe that it is like it's scientific, right? We're putting it on the same level of truth, and we don't recognize that religion is really meant to speak a different language to our souls.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. I'm right with you on that. Totally believe that.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear what you're saying, that it's a different set of tools that I bring to these different parts of being human and understanding who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It'll sound like I'm pushing back.
No.
But I just want to say there are a million things in this world that people are saying, trust me, believe this thing. And once you've deconstructed one and you were so convinced it was true, only to find out it actually was absurd that it was true, then there comes a degree of when you invest yourself in investigating something else, you don't want to be duped again. And so whatever it is, it at least has to make some degree of rational sense. Does that make sense? And not that Celtic Christianity doesn't. Every person's going to decide what does or what doesn't. And for some people, it may seem absurd to them. And it may be an act of integrity to not believe it rather than sort of trust that maybe it's true in spite of their rational sense. Does that make sense?
It sure does. And it helps me because I don't know how many different churches that I'm looking at my wife. I don't know how many churches we've done presentations at. And I'm very aware that some people walk out of there going, no, that's okay. God's pretty big, So somebody may look at me and go, man, I hope you make it to heaven. Okay, I get it. It's all right.
Yeah.
We have to be humble in our approach. I'll never forget the very first beatitude is blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
I had a friend last night. He struggles with anxiety and depression to the point where yesterday he was highly suicidal. And he called me up and he was just sharing his thoughts with me. And he says, Bill, I feel like part of the problem is that I have a bad taste in my mouth about religion, but something inside me says that there's some home for me in religion, and I can't do anything with that. And I think he was expecting me to say like, well, don't go that direction. And instead I said, man, what I would do if I were you is I would take some online quizzes to kind of get a feel for what feels internally true to you, and see what religions match up with that. And then go read about those 4, 5, 6 of them and see if one of them feels like home.
Yeah.
I think there is mystery in the universe. And if we just want the scientific answer on everything, as you're pointing out, we are missing something if we do it that way.
Yeah. I mean, we had that talk. We last week we did an episode on mysticism, and we talked a little bit about this, right? And one of the things I talked about was the pre-trans fallacy, where it's something that's pre-rational that we try to just figure out what it means, like a rainbow. And the rational, we have the rational way of knowing exactly what a rainbow is, and then a trans-rational experience with a rainbow that invites us into the depth of a deeper reality, right? I think this happens as we're looking at religions as well after we've deconstructed, right? There is a vast difference between where you started in an evangelical Christian, black and white, this is the way the Bible is perfectly literally true. And where I came from in Mormonism, we are the one and only true church, the only authority that there's a vast difference between those movements and what you are talking about and what you are doing at Celtic Way. There's a vast difference between what I've experienced there and what I learned at the Living School and what I saw people from all these different traditions doing. And I just want to point that out, because some people look at what you're doing and think it's just another one of these. Where I feel like secular Buddhism, a lot of people, they like that idea of that podcast of secular Buddhism of you don't have to join us, because it lets their nervous system calm down and say, oh, you're not trying to make me into one of you. I'm not going to be pulled into a cult. I'm not going to be pulled into some other thing. Right. And yet we need community.
Have to have it.
We have to have it. If you're going to deepen, you cannot deepen just by yourself.
No.
To your point of the Anamkara, I love that idea in the Celtic spirituality. Does it have to look exactly the way that maybe it's hitting somebody's here of what Anamkara is? But it's representative of this stream of I need people to go with me.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And we can't really have groups unless they have something in common that we're using, whether it's a liturgy or a group of books and poems or something we're just going to decide to read together. My book club doesn't have to be about religion, but we've got something that brings us together that we're investigating. I've been in a book club for 21 years. I think it's quite unusual that I've got a book club that's lasted that long. But to that point, we've got to have something that we're doing. And if it's going to be around spirituality, we're going to have ideas. And one of the things that I love that I'm pulling out of the threads of this conversation, right? One thing you said is we talked early on about giving your authority away versus being asked, what does this mean to you? Mm-hmm. Tell me your interpretation. And I really feel like there's something in that kind of a spirituality that helps you not be duped again, because it's not about affirming what somebody else is saying.
It's not. That would not be the point. Yeah. So we do a lot of practice, spiritual practice. And Bill, Jenna, you tell me if you're familiar. Lectio Divina.
Of course I am, because we talked about that at the Living School. Is that something you're familiar with, Bill?
No. So you take a small passage of scripture, the group of 3 to 5 people. You read it once. You say, what word shimmers, stands out? Word or phrase? That's what you hold. You read it again. You ask yourself the question, where is this engaging in my life? Mm-hmm. And the third time you read it again, and then you create some prayers that are personal prayers around that. You pray in the group. And then afterwards, you all can discuss what it meant to you, what you got out of it, so on and so forth. We also do this thing called Visio Divina, Bill. So Catholics and Celtic people have icons. Do you know what icons are? Oh, shoot.
I know what like the icons on my desktop computer are.
No, these are the original icons. So these are icons. Okay.
So they're objects that.
Well, that's a Mother Mary and Jesus and some angels.
Yeah.
Not the Los Angeles Angels, but just
a representation of sacred figures or whatever.
You can do icons. You can do paintings. I have paintings, photographs. Mm-hmm. My wife takes photographs. You sit with a small group of people and you meditate on these, and then you share your meditation experience. And then there's this thing called Natura. Everything's Latin in Catholic world. Natura Divina. You do a nature walk. Mm-hmm. And so what we've learned to do is we take a picture on our phone and then we bring it back to a group, and we might put it up on the big screen, and we'll use that for meditation. And we do things like this that involve a very deeply personal and subjective experience between the individual and the spirit that's found in nature or found in the text or found in a picture. And we discuss it and pray over it as a community.
So you said the word subjective. You're sharing your subjective experience. You're not there to affirm the objective, whatever someone has decided is the way. Am I hearing that? Mm-hmm. Like you're using these objects to invoke your subjective spirituality that then you're sharing.
Right. Now, that's all done within a context of a very, very large tradition. Mm-hmm. Because the Celtic Christians never saw them outside of Christianity. Mm-hmm. They did not like Rome telling them that they could no longer worship in the groves because they had to worship in a sacred space, which a sacred space for Rome meant that the bishop came and pronounced sacred. And the Celts, they didn't understand. They'd be like, is there something more sacred than what God has made? You know, or they would say women cannot be the head of an abbey, that women cannot be priests, women cannot read the gospel on Sunday morning. And the Celtic people are like, when we are attacked, women are standing next to us, fighting off the people who are attacking us. Mm-hmm. They bear our children in great pain and suffering. They hunt. Mm-hmm. Don't tell us that they can't. Right?
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really inspiring to me. Like, I'm very inspired by a movement that has been able, despite all of the patriarchy and the hierarchy that has been pervasive in all of our Western Christianity. It's really inspiring to me that there are groups of people who have managed to recognize this. The Quakers inspire me in similar ways, right? They have a deep connection to nature and social justice and a lot of these same streams that I hear coming from your tradition.
Well, I have to tell you that it's an hour and 30 minutes and I'm freaking out about the time.
Yes. Let's wrap up.
Okay.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, I'm just so grateful that you were willing to come here and talk through all of this with us because, you know, coming from our tradition, we're new at this and we're isolated. And I think I find such great, I don't know, inspiration and new ideas about how to go about things when I talk to people who have really been on a journey like you have. And I cherish our friendship and I cherish knowing you because you've had such a wide experience throughout your life in so many different ways. But what I so admire in all of it is this deep stream of love, of I want to know more, I want to deepen, I want to be in places that help me deepen, I want to help other people deepen. And that is just so inspiring to me. And you're always open, you're willing to learn and take on these new traditions and find the ones that speak to you and that help you be well.
Yeah.
So it's just an honor to know you and so grateful that you came to talk to us about all of this.
And Bill, I really would like to have more conversations with you if you ever want.
Yeah, only if you bring that Jameson, my friend.
I'm happy to.
Okay.
That's the cost of getting in the door. I'm bringing it.
I love it. Yeah, sounds really
I
good.
would love to be at that dinner. I would love to get you two together.
Where is home at?
Aurora, Colorado.
Okay, so just a little hop, skip, and a jump from southern Utah, but a little ways. But if I'm ever in Colorado, maybe I'll reach out and.
Not maybe.
Okay. I've been in Colorado. I think Denver Airport twice as a layover, but otherwise haven't really had a chance to see Colorado. So. I drove through it. I drove through Colorado when we moved to southern Utah 8 years ago, and it was the most beautiful part of the drive.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we can get you out here, Scott.
Yeah, let's do that.
Either way,
I'll buy the Jameson.
Let me know. You know, it'd be great if we had an information meeting. If you had a group of people who wanted to learn, I can't tell you how many houses I've been in to introduce this to people. So
absolutely. Well, I would love to set something like that up.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Appreciate your time, my friend, and I appreciate your perspective and all the energy and awareness that you've spent putting into knowing these things in this field that I don't have any clue about, and really appreciated getting some familiarity with.
And for people who my biggest touchstone with Celtic spirituality is, besides knowing Scott, is John O'Donohue. That's a name that people may know. John O'Donohue, he passed away just a few years ago, not too long ago. But he has a beautiful way of speaking about this stream of spirituality that is really inviting, really, really accessible for people, deconstructed people, anybody, really. Anyone can really. So start with, the On Being podcast is one of my favorites. It's one of the most beautiful interviews I've ever heard between Krista Tippett and John O'Donohue. So that might be a place for people to get some curiosity. And John also has some books and some things that he's done through Sounds True. He has an Anamkara. That's probably a book and also a series. So anyway, that's just, if people are kind of stirred in curiosity about this way of being in spirituality that really deeply connects us to the earth and to ourselves and to, I think, in a very no nonsense way, our spirituality that might be a place to start. I'll just offer that.
There's a lot of places to begin.
Mm. Yeah. And John Philip Newell would be another one to check out those books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then check out Celtic Way, everybody. Scott's doing wonderful work, and with his podcast and with the work that they're doing there in Denver. So check that out as well.
And it will include, references to your stuff, as well as the book you recommended, Celtic Christianity by Ray Simpson. And then I also will include the John O'Donohue, Krista Tippett On Being podcast as well.
Great.
Sweet. I love it. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah,
thank you.
Great to meet you. Talk soon, Jana.
All right, we'll talk soon. Scott,
have a great day, everybody.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
This has been another Almost Awakened episode. Check us out at almostawakened.org, where you can check out past episodes, make a donation to keep this podcast running, email us a question or comment, or find out more about the resources shared in today's episode. For coaching opportunities or extra support, visit NoNonsenseSpirituality.com to meet with Certified Spiritual Director Brittany Hartley.